It's one of the few ways I can think of that actually might be at least helpful for a few people. So,
Right.
so for this episode, whichever one it happens to be, I'm with my friend Chris Lewis, who I met 20 years ago at a show, and has I know a number of military folk, and it's been fascinating because I am not at all of that, even though my bio dad was, but I didn't really know him. So I know very little about that world, except for the few people whose paths have crossed. And Chris has always been one of the people that I've been able to go to, and I've been able to feel very comfortable going to and saying, "How is this working? How does this work? What does this
Yeah,
do?"
absolutely.
And he's very clear. I was speaking with a friend of mine recently, and I was trying to explain to him, I was like, look, I know a number of people now that are are or were relatively high ranking military people. And one of the things I can state about all of them is they're not idiots and they're not insane. Like it seems like they have these systems for maintaining that. So, and Chris is one of them. But before we get into that, I'll begin with my first question, which is always just kind of a good, and I forgot to do it last night, so now I really have to do it. Um, is What was the first thing that as a kid you felt really passionate about? And it doesn't have anything to do with where you're at now, just like the first thing that really grabbed you and made you like want to know everything about it.
I'm gonna expose my inherent nerdness right now. In 1977, my father took me to the Sac Sherry Theater in downtown Boston, and I saw Star Wars. That was it. I hook, line, and sinker. And then, but that opened up, and then of course, America being America, very quickly we were followed by, Space 1999 was like on TV, and then there was all this fabulous like really when you look at it now, it's like very horrible like technology, but it was great when we were kids. But that sparked the whole science thing. Like I grew an interest, like I started growing interest into NASA, and then watching the space shuttle. I remember watching on TV the first space shuttle taking off, and that was the first like really um, spark or thing. I was absolutely just mesmerized by it, and I still continue to be. Like I still think that I'm glad that we're back in space and all the things that we're doing. It's still just it amazes me that we're able to do that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah, it always blows my mind because every once in a while you'll see people like, well, what has NASA done for us? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, you use your cell phone and like,
right,
how can you not understand how important this is? Uh,
they invented Velcro. Very
right.
very
Yeah,
important things.
yeah. So, how did you end up going from that? How did you end up in the military? I guess was your plan
So
to be a lifer, or did you just?
yeah, no, I really didn't. I always had a fascination with the military and service, and my dad was in the army, and I had an uncle that was in the army during the Second World War. He was actually a POW. He was shot down on a bombing raid over Germany, and so it was around my family, but it was the hard reality is that my I had 5 years in high school, and I had 5 years in high school because sophomore year became a social experiment.
Mhm.
And when you fail English, algebra, biology, and U.S. history, yeah, you have to stay in school. So single, and parents are divorced. My older brothers are out of the house. So what else am I going to do? Not the greatest grades. I got to do something. So I enlisted actually between my junior and senior year on the delayed entry program thing to be um, in the infantry and to jump out of airplanes. And everybody tried to talk me out of it, my mother including. Why do you want to jump out of airplanes? Why do you want to be in the infantry? Those are the people that fight wars. And I just, that's what I wanted to do. And it wasn't because I'm a warmonger. It's not, that has nothing to do with it. It was just, I was fascinated by things like the Second World War, which I still am.
Mhm.
How massive an undertaking that was at the global level, not just by, but I mean, everybody. Um,
You know,
so I enlisted, I did 4 years. That was my enlistment contract, deployed to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And it happened to be that the end of my contract was June of 91. Um, so
Explain the end of your contract, what that,
so when you enlist in the Army, you literally enlist and it's for a certain job in X amount of years.
Mhm.
So my initial contract was actually an 8-year contract, and 4 of that will be in the reserves, and 4 will be on active duty. And then when you're within like a year of the end of your contract, you can reenlist.
Okay.
That means you can do another X amount of years, and that's when guys will reenlist to go to different schools, different duty stations, different places around the world, that kind of stuff.
And
So in
as I understand it, just having talked to a friend of mine, there is a difference then when you join this way versus like going into like ROTC. Is that
Right.
correct?
So I'm an enlisted guy, so I don't have a college degree. The way that the Army and the other branches of the sorry, glass on my head.
Well, it's just weird because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
your head will
yeah.
just,
So officers, you have non-commissioned officers, and you have the enlisted soldiers. So the officers are the smart people, lack of a better term, that go to either one of the service academies like West Point or Annapolis. Um, and then at the end of 4 years are commissioned in a certain branch within their respective armed forces, and they do officer things. ROTC does the same thing, where you could go to a university that has a ROTC program, and then at the end of your 4 years, you are commissioned, and it's just a different source of providing officers. Me as an enlisted guy, I had to work my way through the ranks of being a lower enlisted guy, and then I pinned on sergeant, and then you just sergeant, staff sergeant, sergeant first class, and then all the way to sergeant major, which is what I retired at 5 years
that was what
ago. So
my friend, when I was talking to him about you, and I had to actually look it up and it had what your rank was. And he was like, so yeah, so this is as high as you can get
yeah,
enlisted.
right, right. So I did 4 years, and I'm deployed to Saudi Arabia for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And I don't know if I told you this before, but I have 2 older brothers. One of them, my brother Bruce, died of AIDS in December of '91, and he was diagnosed while I was in Saudi Arabia. So it wasn't like I could come back, and because we were building up for the invasion. But I knew we came back from Saudi Arabia in like the 2nd of April. It's coming up on the anniversary of that in '91. I went home on leave, and like he was okay, but like he was
Mhm.
not, it wasn't like he was going to get better.
Right.
So I tried to stay in the Army and re-enlist to get an assignment somewhere in Massachusetts. They couldn't do it. So I got out because I'm like, my brother was more important. So I went, actually get out of the Army in June of '91. That's when I started DJing, actually, at a club in Fayetteville outside of Fort Bragg. Went back to Boston in September, and he passed in December.
Mhm.
But that's when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I actually was working at Man Ray in Cambridge.
Mhm.
That's how I know Chris Ewan, and
Mhm.
he hired me as a barback and then as security, and then I had the opportunity to go back in active duty, back in the regular Army in February of '93. So I reenlisted to go back on active duty, and I just did another 27 years, and that wasn't the plan. It really wasn't. I was looking at doing 20 because that's a pension and benefits, and um, but things turned out where they offered me. Uh, I was competing for a slot to go to the Sergeant Major's Academy, which is in El Paso, Texas, and that's a 10-month long structured course. Um, I got um, selected for it, went to it, but you have to commit to 3 years after you graduate the academy. So I did. Um, at that point, that put me at about the 28-year window.
Well, I
And
remember you
then
came
I said,
through El
well,
Paso and you were there and you were at
that's
the,
right. That's right. I came to see you guys. That's right. That's right. Up on the west side. That's right. And and then I was at 28 years. I was here, and my boss was like, "Can you stick around for another year and a half?" Because there was long story short, the guy who was supposed to come in behind me, there was some issues, and he couldn't, and they didn't have a replacement. And I was like, "Yeah, all right, I'll stick around." And it worked out well because I ended up volunteering at the Infantry Museum, and that turned into them hiring me as the working at the museum. So, but yeah, it wasn't. I did not plan on doing 30 years when I first joined. That was not the. But it was funny how things turn out. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it's a you know what, your when your path presents itself, it just makes sense, hopefully, and you're able to follow it. And you know, I I always have this. I know you create myths around your friends, I think,
Sure.
and in my head, I have you as this like the guy. My understanding of the sergeants is always like the guy in the military who's like the one who just he knows how everything works,
Pretty
and
much.
like I am the rational voice. Like they're going to tell you to do shit, and I'm going to explain the why of it or why
Right.
not. We're not doing it that way.
The basic when people ask me about what sergeants do, and here's a great little example.
Mhm.
All right, Stephen Archer is Lieutenant Stephen Archer. You're my platoon leader,
Okay.
and you say to me, you say, Sergeant Lewis, I need you to make sure that I need that wall painted blue by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I go, okay, sir, I got it. And then I'm the guy that says, I grab the guys working for me. All right, you go get paint. You go get rollers. You go get drop cloths. You go get lights. We're gonna start, and like
Your
they give the orders,
logistics.
I execute the orders,
Mhm.
but also figure out like how to do them. Like you know what I mean? They don't micromanaging is not a not one of my favorite things in the world. Just tell me what you need done, and I'll get it done.
Mhm.
Um, and that kind of develops leadership, and it develops how people are able to critically think and solve problems that um, not something that you would go to school for, but
Mhm.
because of that skill set and being able to like not back down from I got this problem in front of me. What am I going to do? How am I going to get to how am I going to get to yes? How am I going to get this done?
Right.
That kind of stuff. And that's really what the basic premise of what we do.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm pragmatic to a fault in my life. Uh, Often to not necessarily my detriment, but maybe the frustration of people I know, because I'll just something will come up and I'll be like, okay, I know you want some sort of like really elegant thing here. We're not doing that. Here's the
No.
simplest solution to this problem to get us from here
Yep.
to here. And that's not
Absolutely.
as fun or whatever, but that's how we're going to do it. You know?
I kind of made a name for myself, exactly what you're saying, because we would get my first job as an operations sergeant major, and the unit was a 3,600 soldier unit in Louisiana. And we would get guidance from our higher headquarters. Hey, you need to do this. And they would tell us how to do it. And I would go to my boss and be like, hey, we're gonna get it done, but we're not doing it the way they want us to do it. We're gonna do it this other way because this is a lot more easier and a lot smarter. And we will get to the end state. It will be what they want to happen, but I'm not doing it the way they want us to do it.
Mhm.
I kind of built a name for myself by doing that. So,
No, that's cool though. I like that was kind of the impression that I got. So, um, as you as an officer in the military, but you're for most of this time period, I get the impression you were in the U.S., right?
uh,
Your tours over
so
there
I
earlier on, but then,
right. So I did my first enlistment was at Fort Bragg, and then I got out and came back. And the second one I was at Fort Bragg, and then I went to Germany for 3 years. Um, did peacekeeping in Bosnia and in Macedonia, which was interesting to say the least. Came back to the States, actually went on recruiting duty for the Army in Waterville, Maine, of all places. That's where Colby College is, right between Augusta and Bangor. Did that for 3 years. Then 9/11 happened.
mm,
Back to the 82nd. Did three. This is when you and I met. I had just come back from my third tour in about 26 months. I
mm,
was in Afghanistan from January to August of '03. Then we went to Iraq January to May of '04, and then I went back to Afghanistan September to November of '04. Um, when I left Fort Bragg, I went to be a drill sergeant in South Carolina. Um, did that for 3 years, and then I went out to El Paso, where I was a first sergeant for about 4 years. Went back to Fort Bragg for a year, and then came back to El Paso for the Sergeant Major's Academy, and that's when I saw you guys. And then from there, I went to Louisiana. Another trip to Afghanistan at that assignment, and then from Louisiana came here. So yeah, majority was in the United States, but I did do some overseas gigs here and there.
right. Is it it's a remarkable breadth of experience. I mean, kind of like I expect to hear that you were overseas doing this or that, but then to hear the recruiting part of it or
Yeah,
being a drill sergeant, which to
yeah,
me like very specialized skills,
yeah,
almost like somebody joins the military and somewhere along the line somebody goes, that guy's a drill sergeant for the rest of his life because he's got the thing,
yeah.
you know.
They
It's interesting.
and
They play
I
mixing.
didn't get yeah, and I didn't volunteer for either one of those assignments to be a recruiter or a drill sergeant. The Army said you're going to go do these things, and I was like, well, shit, okay.
Hey, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I imagine you
I
don't get a lot of choice.
the drill sergeant thing was interesting just because you kind of it was during the height of this is 2005 to 2008, so the war was going full steam in both countries, and being able to give and share skill sets and things that I had observed and done, and um, to to these soldiers that were getting ready to deploy overseas. So that was important. Um, and for your listeners, so I went back to Iraq in 2009 and 2010, and that is when you guys did a very special thing, which I will always hold near and dear to my heart that you and your wife did. You sent me a advanced edition of your 2010 record before anyone else had it. So that was literally hitting the waves of Mosul before I think you could get it in the States. And that was like, that was just, that was really cool. Like that helped the morale quite a bit because, let's just say the Radio Mosul doesn't have like really good punk rock or industrial records on their set list. And
Yeah,
so,
I would think not. Um, that's cool. I honestly didn't even remember that. So that's
yeah,
and I just for anybody else who is listening and with the band thing or in a band or as an artist of any kind, yeah, like whenever opportunities come up to help somebody, like I just do it, like
yeah,
because it literally could just be like you tossing a CD in the mail and however much the postage is to you.
right.
So there's a really cool story about that. Um, when I was a kid, like maybe 12 or something, I ran across this book in a store called Cosmic Banditos. And it's
Okay.
really weird, like I don't even know how to explain it, but it's good and it gets into physics and science and all that stuff.
Right.
Um, but and then recently, like I went and I do a lot of audiobooks, and I went and I looked it up and I was like, oh, hey, there's an audiobook of Cosmic Banditos. I'll get that. And I was like, what a weird thing that it's an audiobook. Because like, it was so eccentric and I never heard of it after that. Like I had my copy, never saw it again.
Right.
And so the author is telling the story. He's like, so why is this here? Well, let me tell you. And maybe it was Desert Storm. I don't remember which one it was. But when X War came up, I looked in my basement and had hundreds of copies of this. And there was a thing where they were like, please send books
Yeah.
to us.
Any soldier letters or any soldier packages. Yeah.
And so he just shipped hundreds of copies of this one book.
Awesome.
And he was like, I get email or messages back saying, we were just passing it around from person to person to
Yeah.
person. And it became this huge, weird little thing,
Yeah.
and like agree with whatever's going on, don't agree with whatever. The people on the ground are still on the ground fighting and trying to survive, and they're still
Yep.
humans and they're still Americans, and they're there because they want to do whatever they believe is right, you
Right.
know.
Yep. Absolutely.
Like the people, the guys on the ground are not the bad guy, regardless of whether you agree or not.
No. Nope.
And so like, yeah, I think it's as far as I'm concerned, it is if that potential is available or those moments come up, man, you just take it and you do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's
Yep.
such a little thing that you can do, Um, how that's amazing because yeah, like I'd completely forgotten about that. Um, so this is interesting because with most of these, I've been able to kind of slowly formulate questions to
Right.
just to kind of keep things moving. And this one is much harder because I don't know what is appropriate to ask. I don't want things to be ghoulish. I don't want to.
You. Stephen, you can ask me whatever because the
Uh,
great thing about your recording is you can edit whatever
well,
you,
that is true. That is
yeah.
true.
So
Oh, well, okay,
go
I
ahead.
do have one actually. So, not that one shouldn't be ghoulish at all. I imagine you were like you were saying, where you were able to be a uh, hmm, holes in brain. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When you were training people using your stuff,
Right. Right.
and drill sergeant. That's the word.
Right.
Um,
The fancy hat.
yeah. So I imagine there's the general, at least my general view is Emery with his "you don't know this that go" kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And is there a balance where you have to go from kind of being this inhuman sort of thing who makes sure shit's getting done and you're learning it
Yes.
properly, and actually being able to kind of go, hey, all right, how far I can't push you this, too far
Well,
without you shattering.
so there's when we go, so the drill sergeant school, I think it's 6 weeks. I went to it, and so you there are standards, there's guidance, there are directives of what we can and can't do.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I always took it to light that America's mothers and fathers are entrusting their children to us.
Hmm.
So that was a big thing that sometimes you can remind people of that. And everybody is not, because the biggest thing would be physical fitness, because physical fitness is directly related to doing things for the organization. And that was, in I don't, I was kind of the quiet guy because I was the platoon sergeant. There were three drill sergeants in my platoon, me and two others, and they were lower ranking than I. But it was like if I came out and just looked at them and didn't say anything and then walked back in my office, they were terrified. I didn't have to say a word because then the other two drill sergeants, oh, you guys messed up. He's pissed now. He never comes out and does that,
Don't fuck up.
Yeah, and just it's just simply it's you got to instill discipline, and sometimes it becomes a bit draconian, and that's part of the org. That's um and paying attention to detail and doing, uh, dude. The frightening one of the biggest things about being a drill sergeant is like these kids that we had kids, young men and women that were joining the army, like they didn't have life skills.
Right.
Like they didn't know how to make beds. They didn't know how to do laundry. They didn't know how to do like all these little things that we still. Oh, and you got to qualify with M16, and then you have to do. It was a lot of work to do that. But yeah, you don't. If I fly off the handle every day they're not going to learn anything.
Right.
And I actually would do so. Day one, they get off the bus and we yell and scream at them, and they're blah blah blah. We do all this. It's all scripted, and then we assign them their platoons, and they come up in the platoon bay, and it's just like in the movies, big open,
Hmm.
um, uh, 30 bunk beds, 60 wall lockers. They all stand in front, they're in a position of attention, just very similar to what you see in like Full Metal Jacket.
Hmm.
But then I'd have them all sit down, um, and I'd take my hat off and I'd be like, all right, I'm going to have this conversation with you. And I'd talk just like I'm talking right now. And I'm like, look, I have a job to do. I get up before you do. I go to bed after you do. My drill sergeants and I have families. And so I'm not here to be your friend. I'm not here to like make alliances with you. I have to train you, and I have 9 weeks to do it.
Hmm.
Okay, so don't take it personally unless you make it that way. So I have to be that guy, but I will treat you as a professional and respectful manner as I can, unless you do something that causes me not to do that. Just and I said the next time we have this conversation will be in 8.5 weeks when you're getting ready to graduate. Any questions? And they're all okay. And the hat would go back on, and it was game on
Hmm.
because I did care about him because that's my. You don't want to be the guy that. And there were some drill sergeants I knew where like if a kid was trained by that drill sergeant, everyone was like, "Ooh, dude, that guy sucks." You know what I mean? Like I want to make sure that we can do as good a job as we could in the time allotted and get them prepared for what may come in front of them. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's a time and place, but it wasn't. leer me 24/7. Um, but there was a time and place for it. So
I would be fascinated because somewhere along, and I can already come up with kind of a rationale for it, but I would be fascinated to know somewhere along the line there must have been some, or maybe not, but I would think there would be some sort of consultation with psychiatrists or sociologists or whatever, and they went, okay, and the first thing that comes to mind is the reason that you would dive into that persona is to shock people into recognizing they are now in a different world. They are now property. You are now having
10,000%. Yes.
like you have to get out of this idea of mom and dad take care of me to now
No.
this is what your role is. So I guess that's
The,
the,
the the term that one of my friends used, and I still use it quite often, is that um, these young soldiers, he would tell them like, look, no one dragged you into a recruiting station and put pen to paper and go like this. You did it.
right.
So there is in any organization that you're going to become a member of, you have to cut your teeth and you got to pay, you got to work at it. And this is the ego likeness of Steven and Donna 20 years ago. You know what I mean? When you guys first started as a band, you guys had to like play those shows and those little gigs but you had to build, your confidence and you got your sound and all that kind of stuff. Well, this is the same thing. I
Yeah,
got to
well,
show you.
I've even had to do that with people in the band, like when we'd
Sure.
have back in the day when we had more of a band, and I would have to sit down with them. It's like, look, I'm your friend, but right now, this is your job, and you
Right.
need to do these things, or
Right.
this is not going to work. And these parts are never going to be fun, but they have to happen. And if you
Right.
bitch about it, there's no point in doing this. A friend of mine who we did a lot of touring with once explained it as he was like, you're on tour, and if somebody starts to fall apart or whatever, you would kind of have to turn to me and be like, look. You're in space, and millions of people want to get out and go in space, but you're in space. You're doing it.
Right.
You can't go home because
No.
you're in a space capsule, and you have to get along with everybody because you're in a space capsule. Once you get home, you never have to do it again. But for right now, you asked for this. It's part of the job, and you have to do
Yes.
it with us. Like
And also the teamwork aspect of it, because you're part of an organization where it's not you have an individual skill set, but you are going to be part of that team or squad or platoon or company or whatever. And that if you don't chip in and do your part, other people could get injured or worse because you're not doing what the hell you're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
Um, and that was a big thing to impart. Is that it's not about sure there's an individuality in everybody,
Mhm.
but what
We're not here
the
to celebrate that. Like,
right.
celebrate that another time, but right now you're part of this.
Yep. Like I need you to do your job and do your things, um, um, and that was could be precarious at times as well.
Mhm.
Um, but we did it, and the other thing is I added humor to it. I really did when I could. So when and I would let if the platoon was doing well through training, and I would let not my guard down, but I'd kind of joke around with them and be a little more human and do so. One of the things that was like kind of my what I would look forward to every Wednesday. So I don't know if you guys are in Columbia, South Carolina, a place called the Art Bar.
Yeah, we played there. Mhm.
Oh, I love that place. So my buddy, and here's the funny thing, Andy Rogers, the guy that owns the place, him and I were in the 82nd Airborne, and we went to Desert Storm together.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't have a bar tab the whole time I was. um, but he did. There was a guy that did a karaoke night on Wednesdays, and it was Mr. B's Good Time Karaoke Explosion. And I would, if it was Wednesday, and they had tasks to do to like clean the barracks or clean their weapons, and I was like, "Hey, my watch, it's 6:15. What do I do every Wednesday at at 8 p.m.? Where am I?" And the whole platoon would go, "You are at Mr. B's Good Time Karaoke Explosion Drill, Sergeant." And I'm like, "Okay, so let's go. Hurry up, chop chop." And you know what I mean? So I try to kind of inject a little bit of humor when needed, and but that actually gave them some motivation. Like, oh, he'll leave here early, and like we gotta get him out of here.
Well, I remember like back in the day in DC, I mean, we would have military guys come out to the Roxy and just be part of the
Yeah,
industrial community, just do their thing. Although the person I was talking to last night, he was saying how he would go and visit his brother who was at one of the DC academies or something like that. And
right.
apparently, and this was in like after 2000, and they were not allowed to go to the 930 Club, which I thought was really odd because it's
Really?
like the old 930 Club, I could kind of get it because it was pretty scrungy, scary punk
Right.
thing. But the new one, it was just like it's like going to a theater, man. It's like it's such a weird like thing.
Yeah, I went and saw Skinny Puppy there in 2004.
I think I was at that show.
Yeah, I was there. That was we a bunch of us drove up from North Carolina, and we stayed at some hotel in Alexandria, and yeah, that was yeah. The two times I saw them was 92 and in 2004. So
That
uh,
I I've played that venue a few times,
yeah,
and seriously, it is one of the absolute. It's just a joy to perform at. It's a joy to see bands at, but it's also on the back end, on the flip side, it's like they give you cupcake. Oh, actually, shit. I'm
yeah,
drunk.
there, yeah, right on.
But yeah. So it's just I one of the things you kind of key into when you're on tour is that you'll roll into some venue and it may be some shithole little place, right?
Right,
But you'll key into the fact that the people that are working at it love it. They love
right,
it and they take care of it. It's like it may be a shithole, but it's our shithole versus
yeah,
like the shitholes that are just shitholes. And it's like, yes, I work here. This is
right.
I'm
I
working.
mean, that was the Middle East in Cambridge, which is across where Man Ray used to be, and they used to have an all ages show on Saturdays at like 3 o'clock, and a bunch like I was in high school, and then we snuck in. We collectively told each other's parents like, oh, we're going to whatever. We took the subway and we saw the Descendants, and Milo dripped sweat on me, and just like holy crap, and but it was such a dump,
Mhm.
um, but I mean it was so much cool music and like things that came out of that place, and it's still there. I mean, I think they've upgraded a little bit, but not too much, but
The
um,
single most punk rock show I ever went to was totally under everything radar. Like somebody at one point just all of a sudden it just got around to everybody. It's like, okay, the UK subs are playing in this abandoned store on 14th Street in DC today in like
holy
3 hours.
crap,
And who everybody went in there was like, I'm not saying it was a dirt floor. I'm saying there was no floor and it was dirt because that was the ground was there.
right,
And then
right,
there was a stage, and I don't know how they got a PA or anything in there. Yeah,
right.
it was amazingly gross. Uh,
Holy moly.
yeah.
That's the only thing like I could count similar to that, but then like not in a hole in the wall place, but I lived in I grew up in Foxborough, Massachusetts, which is halfway between it's like halfway between Boston and Providence. And sometimes we go down to Providence because there was a couple of cool there was a place called Club Babyhead back in the day that and there was this I can't remember the name of the place, but we went down on a Sunday and let's go check some bands out. Like, and we, just to go, it was like, like $2 to get in. So we're walking by this one, I think it was Lupo's was the name of the place. But on the marquee, it had a band, and then above it, it said uh, um, Tin Machine. And I went,
No
no,
kid.
it can't be.
Yeah.
Well, let's go check. I mean, it was like $8 to get in. So like, okay, we went in and they had $1.50 Rolling Rocks. And the first band came out and did like 5 or 6 songs. They were okay. And then like you could see they were kind of putting up and changing the stage around, all that stuff. And then lo and behold, the Thin White Duke himself walked out, and I was like, "You have got to be fucking kidding me!" And there was maybe 50 people in this place, and David Bowie did what David Bowie does, and the Sales Brothers and Reeves Gabrels, and I was astonished. And he was very, I mean, it means David Bowie. But they were like, as soon as the show was gone, like, poof, they were gone. And I think because they were on the way to New York.
Mhm.
But I was like, I just saw David Bowie for $8. Like, what
Yeah.
is this? What is happening right now? Such a great show. Um, I didn't realize till very recently that Reeves Gabrels now is the guitarist for The Cure.
Huh.
That's what he played in Tin Machine. I think he was like a studio guy, anyways. But so yeah, of all the gin joints in all the world.
So now to go in a very, very different direction.
Yes.
You've been deployed overseas, you've been in wars. and you have, I assume, done all of the things that you do when you're in this
Yeah.
job.
Yes.
Um, you have always been, as near as I know, incredibly stable, but I imagine like, do you have to do you have to build architecture for yourself to separate out the guy who does that stuff and you as Chris? Or and is there architecture within the military itself that helps stay stable?
So I'll tell you that the early part of the war, 2002, 2003 timeframe, it was like, hey, we're deploying and we're going.
Mhm.
And the Army learned some very, and I'm sure as the other branches learned some very hard lessons about things called dwell time. Like you don't send a guy back to back to back deployments because um, yeah, like I think I mentioned earlier, I did 3 deployments in 26 months. Afghanistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, and that's a lot, like in that small amount of time. And you do, I think the tougher thing, you internally, everybody has their own way of constructing that architecture, for lack, as you referenced it. But I think the hardest thing was, I didn't. I have a son that was born in 2000, so like he's 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm
Mhm.
disappearing, and his mother is trying to explain to him like what I'm doing, and then he asks me about it, like, how do you relate to? So yeah, do you build walls? Do you build? And everybody does it their own way, has a
Right.
way of doing it. The I tend to like would not really say too much for fear of like freaking people out. And although the time you and I met, I was DJing in Raleigh with Dirge Factory and my dear friends Laura and Nathan, and then of course Joey Shell at Legends, and they're just great dudes. And Joey was, and I've known Joey for years, and he even was like, "How do you like find sanity?" And to be totally honest, man, a lot of it has to do with music.
Mhm.
Like I would make, or I'm gonna date myself, I would make a CD and it
Mhm.
would have certain songs on it. And that was like,
Center.
if I, yeah, like this is I gotta get hyped up for something.
Mhm.
Or like if I'm at the gym and working out, which there's a lot of ego likeness music. Um, in fact, is it what was the West CD? You did the
Uh,
four,
Sirens and Satellites,
yes.
uh,
It was
and
like a north, south, east, and west. And there's one,
yeah,
the
yeah, it took us a
Antima
while to do
remix.
all of it, but yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was like ministry level. Like, but anyways, like that helped me stay focused. Because it's not just individually. Like I got to worry about my guys and the
Right.
guys, and make sure they're okay. And
And how many
but yeah,
guys are under you for things like this?
right. There's not like and the Army has gotten a lot better in that because now they track how many days. Okay, so you go on deployment for 10 months. And then they actually track how many days you are back in the United States before another deployment comes. And sometimes guys don't deploy because, hey, you just came back
Right.
and and you've got a family so they've gotten better about that. And they've also gotten better about making mental health a priority
Yeah.
um, across the board. And Stephen, I'll be completely transparent with you. So when I retired, um, my disability rating from the VA, I got 100%. So
Hmm.
I have a cool little license plate I get good parking spots all the time. But most of that disability is PTSD related, which I didn't realize it was that until I got screened for it. And it just manifests its way in different ways that I've had to learn how to deal with it and identify things that will cause it to go into certain, like a big thing with me is smells.
Hmm.
Um, Iraq and Afghanistan have a certain smell about them, and it's like diesel. It's like a diesel oil and like dust and sand. It's hard to explain. Um, but my lovely bride Mikey, we went out to dinner when I got back from Mosul in 2010, and it was like, let's go to Outback. Okay, cool. That's a safe bet, right? And they were trying out some new flavors of steaks, and the steak they brought me, it literally smelled like um, a burning pile of tires that the Iraqis used to do when we were in. I was like, and I started kind of not like freaking out, but she saw like a change in me, like, you okay? And I'm like, this smells like Mosul. And the manager came by, he was like, I'm really sorry, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, 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 it just, and they caught my meal. And I said, I wasn't trying to do that.
Right, right.
It's just weird, like smells and um, some things you see, sometimes things you hear.
Hmm.
But yeah, you have to build an architecture because if you don't, um, and it's not a you have to do it because you have to be able to insulate yourself from some of those things. Like I will tell you, man, a very, very, very dark day for me. And a little bit after time, I was watching the pullout from Afghanistan.
Hmm.
It made my teeth hurt. I was so angry, and I was angry for a long time about that because like we could have done a better job at that.
Hmm. Yeah.
I was mad at our military leadership. I was mad at our country's leadership. I was mad at um, like here's a case in point. Like the last my last trip to Afghanistan, we had a local Afghan. I had two guys that were interpreters that worked for me. One worked in my headquarters, but he had a top secret clearance because he left Afghanistan in like 2001, had been in the States and been vetted, great guy, and so he did the interpreting and that stuff. But the other guy was my interpreter that we had when we went out on patrols and stuff. I know he's dead
Hmm.
because I know as soon as the Taliban came in, they were like, "Okay, you tell us who worked for the Americans, or we're going to kill your asses." That probably pisses me off the most,
Right.
is there's a lot of good people there that are now subject to um, that culture that they were trying to get away from, and I just
And you feel if
I was
they
angry for
withdrawal
a very
differently,
long time.
you feel if they had done the withdrawal differently or slower or whatever, you would have been able to
Yeah,
insulate.
I think there was a better way that we it could have been done. I don't necessarily agree with how it was done or where it was done, and I don't. I mean, it's the graveyard of empires. That country always has been, but nonetheless, I feel like we made a promise to a lot of people there, and we didn't carry through with it. So
Yeah, I'm barely aware of how all of that stuff fits together. And so,
right,
but even as it got to me, I'm like, that's a big machine to like kind of get rid of really quickly. And also what floods back in to
right.
that, like it's just, I just don't see any way of that being good.
No,
Like,
it
all for
was
about having war, but
the fancy doctrinal term that we use. It was a shit sandwich, and there was really um, there really wasn't a good way they could have done that. But I think I'm more than one of my very good friends was the second to last guy to leave Afghanistan, and he was the sergeant of the Second Airborne Division. And when they left that night on a C-17, he took the picture of the division commander, a two-star general, walking up the ramp of the C-17 as the last two Americans. And that's just how as leaders they walked to make sure everybody was on that, and there was nobody left that
Mhm.
was wearing a U.S. patch on their shoulder, um, carrying an M4 in his hand, and like looking like every other soldier. And but yeah, it just there's a I would encourage you to watch on Netflix. There's a film. It's called Retrograde, and it was filmed during the when the pullout started, and it was filmed through the lens of a special forces team that had an embedded journalist. But they happened to, and these Green Berets were advising a Afghan army unit
Mhm.
when the orders came down, like, "Hey, we're leaving," and it just captures the. It's all right. It
No, no, I
captures
just brought my phone. That was all.
the panic and the tension of what was going on. It's pretty raw too. Like from the Afghan perspective too, which that's what I enjoyed about it because no one really thinks about that for those dudes. anyways, but
So, and you got all the personnel out, and it was a very, very short window of time, like just a few months or something,
right,
wasn't it?
right,
So the infrastructure then ended up staying, or
right.
were they
Well,
get as much of the
right.
that out as they could?
So the Bagram Air Base, which you would hear that in the news, and Bagram is about 26 miles north of Kabul. Bagram Air Base is bigger than the Atlanta airport. It is massive.
Mhm.
And we basically locked the doors, got on aircraft, and left in the middle of the night and gave it to them. But
Mhm.
there was no way, it wasn't, we didn't have a choice. And now a lot of the infrastructure and vehicles and weapons and equipment that were left there were not ours.
Mhm.
Yes, they were made in the US, but most of that, almost the majority of it, was stuff that we had already given to the Afghan army.
Mhm.
There was a lot of, you know, bogus intel that was coming out on all the major news networks, like, oh, the Americans left all this equipment here. And I'm like, well, it was, we gave it to the Afghans. We took everything. The only thing we couldn't retrograde back were a lot of the vehicles. So the MRAPs, the big armored um, mine mine resistant armored
Ones with
vehicles.
the bottoms
Yeah,
there.
the V hulls, yeah, and all that stuff. Just because they're so heavy, but they disabled all of them. They did things like made, and the Taliban are using them all again now, but they're not at the capability of what they were when we were using them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like basically the ones we gave them have like 8-track AM radios in them. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
not, that's the best way I can describe it. So,
right, right. Um, so so after all that and you came back. So what is your role then in like before you started working at the museum, you know, you were here and you had people under your
right,
command. So
right.
what is the military's role in the US when they're not like being at war, like
Well, the biggest thing is training, is
Mhm.
is is having all the military installations around the entire United States. They're postured for um, units being able to conduct training on whatever the myriad of tasks that they have to do, whether it's the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, the Space Force. All of these entities all working together to protect our country and then protect the interests of our overseas interests at the same time. And that's why we have like we have bases in Alaska
Mhm.
and we have bases in Hawaii, and now we are looking at reopening facilities in the Philippines. There's a big we're in Germany. There's all kinds of places around the world because if we have to, and of course there's a large presence in Romania and Poland because of the Ukraine, and it's deterrence as
Mhm.
well. So by having a large U.S. Army presence. I mean, think about it. For years and years and years, we had thousands and thousands of soldiers and units in West Germany because the Fulda Gap and the wall was up, and that was the only reason they were there is because is if the Russians were going to invade.
Mhm.
Tom Clancy novel was actually going to happen. And then all those units drew down because when the wall, when reunification happened. But now there's starting to be a buildup again because of what's going on in Ukraine and with Russia in general. And
Right, right.
it's just having everybody trained and ready and prepared for whatever is put in front of them. Because we don't know. We can
Right.
anticipate, we can guess, we can plan. But like when Iraq invaded Kuwait in August 1990, I knew where Iraq was. I really didn't know where Kuwait was,
Mhm.
but I sure as hell found out pretty quick.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's just continuous training, preparation, schooling, making sure equipment is properly maintained, qualified on weapon systems, and all those things that we do with um, um, just to keep people on their toes and um, having the United States have the ability to be ready in case anything happens. That's really
Mhm.
what it comes down to.
Just to kind of as a point I want to make to anybody watching this or listening to it or whatever, I, in case it isn't readily apparent, I have a ridiculous amount of respect for Chris. Um, my views on all of this, I think, have been pretty clear if you've watched any of these things. But they're in no way am I don't know what the proper term is, loading up little gotcha questions where I'm like, okay,
No, no, no. Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
I know.
really do know
Of course.
that, but I kind of feel like it's important to, we were talking about this earlier, but it's like we're both rational people, and we understand the things that we can agree to disagree about that
Right,
are practical, applications of how the military works within the United States or how the government works or whatever. And we also agree that oppressing people or taking away their rights is bad. So
right,
like we're on the same team. And one of the things I greatly appreciate with Chris has always been one of the, like I said, he's one of those people that I've been able to kind of be like, this is really scary. How does this work?
right,
Or
right.
whatever. And he has well, and this will segue really nicely. He has a great, not just understanding of what's happening right now, but how it relates to what's happened in history
Sure.
and is able to contextualize things, which is very fucking cool. Which, as I said, brings us to what you are doing now, which is very fucking cool.
So at the National Infantry Museum, I got hired when I retired in early 2020 to be the education director. They hadn't had an education director in quite some time, and I was a little apprehensive because if you look industry standard for museums, an education director normally has a master's degree in education, which I do not have a master's degree in education. But my boss said, you were a drill sergeant, you were a sergeant major, and you're a history nerd, so I'm not worried about it. So I did that for 2 years, and now I'm the vice president of operations for the museum. So I kind of handle the day-to-day business, how the building works, how the people work, all the functions and stuff. So,
Sounds
but
like a very sergeant sort of job. You're
it very much is. And my bosses are a retired one-star general and a retired colonel, so it kind of works.
Mhm.
Um, but at the end of the day, the main mission of the National Infantry Museum, where I work, is to honor the service and sacrifice of soldiers from past, present, and future, and honor the service of our young American men and women that have worn the uniform, and specifically as in the infantry. It's a pretty neat building. We get artifacts that go back almost 250 years.
it's located.
We are in Columbus, Georgia, right up against the border with Fort Benning, which is home to the what's known as the Maneuver Center of Excellence, which contains the United States Army Infantry School and the United States Army Armor School, which we train infantry, we train tankers and Cav Scouts here, and as well as a bunch of other stuff. 75th Ranger Regiment is here, Jump School is here, that kind of stuff. So, but the museum, we have artifacts. We have 33,000 artifacts in the collection. We only have about 7% of them on display, simply because the breadth of things that we have spans all of our nation's wars, to the American Revolution till today. In fact, this year, little history trivia. So on the 14th of June, 1775, the Second Continental Congress authorized the establishment of 10 companies of infantry. So not only is it the 250th birthday of the infantry, it's the 250th birthday of the United States Army this year. And
Wow.
we got some shindigs and things we're planning for that, some big events and stuff. But the bottom line is being able to one of the most important things I think we do. All of the young men and women that join the army to be in the infantry, whether they're enlisted or officers, they come to the museum and we train them on the heritage and history and customs and traditions of the infantry because they're going to become the caretakers of it.
Mhm.
Whether they do 4 years, whether they do 30, like my dumbass did, you inherently are going to write chapters of our Army's history and at the same time, our country's history at the same time. And being able to be involved with that and shape that and share that knowledge with it's pretty neat. It's a very it's a very interesting place to work. And as I tell people, like I'm not complaining. I work in an air conditioned building filled with guns. It's not a bad gig at all. I'm just saying. So,
This
but
is
it's really a neat place.
interesting. You were talking about infantry traditions and things like that, and it kind of I guess it never occurred to me. But the way you're talking about is that actually the infantry, that there is kind of a certain level of an established culture
Mhm.
that is, I would, outside of, not outside, but maybe isolated within the military itself,
Right.
specifically that the infantry will have. And I just think that's a very interesting idea. Like I just never
Yeah,
thought about it.
there's an old there's a Roman, and I'm paraphrasing the shit out of this, and I apologize, but there's a Roman adage that you don't own a piece of real estate until your men are standing on it. Um, and that's been the role of the infantry for hundreds and hundreds of years. I like to one of and I tell this story a lot to a lot of people. When I because I get asked what do I look at as some of the most rewarding things I've done in my career, and one of them was I've been um, so I did 6 combat deployments, 3 to Iraq, 3 to Afghanistan, and I did peacekeeping in Bosnia and in Macedonia. But in those combat deployments, to look at like people's faces who had lived under oppression for who knows how long, and there I am with all my kit, gear, helmets, cool phase plasma pulse rifles in the 40-watt range and all that stuff, but that U.S. flag on my shoulder. They see and now they see this thing right here. Let me see if we can get it back. That right there, that shows it's a symbol of hope.
Mhm.
No matter what the political ramifications are, that what we do in our country and who our leadership is and the things they do and don't do and all that kind of stuff, that still I try to pass that off to people, like you, that and the immense amount of respect you have for me is vice versa, my friend. You and your lovely bride. Um, that glimmer of hope that they look at that U.S. flag and they're like, okay, they're here. There's a reason why they're here, and hopefully they can make things better. That's
Mhm.
really what it comes down to, because there's some really, really top level tyrant assholes on this planet.
Yeah.
I've seen them. I've seen quite a few of them. And I hope I I always look at it that I did the job that I did so that Steve and Donna could do eagle likeness things and other people could do other things.
Mhm.
Because for some ridiculous reason, I thought, hey, this will be a great idea. I'm going to go jump out of airplanes and go and do all this other stuff. But that gives the ability to have this wonderful, for all its idiosyncrasies. I can honestly say that there's no other place I would rather live on this planet except this country.
Mhm.
It has its good and bad, but you and I are able to have a conversation and talk about things without retribution or fear of those intangibles that, like, I think people lose sight on that.
Yeah.
Um,
I hope it stays that way. Um, you said so one, you were deployed as a soldier, and then you also said peacekeeping. Is that
right,
just as part of like a security force? We're just
right.
here in case something goes wrong, or just to keep
So
going wrong.
if so, when in December 1995, the Dayton Peace Accord was brokered by President Clinton between what were the warring factions of what used to be Yugoslavia. So Tito was a big, gigantic asshole, but Tito kind of everybody was terrified of him. And when he died, Yugoslavia went into all the different countries.
Mhm.
So the Dayton Peace Accord was signed. Part of it was that NATO would go in and provide stabilization forces because between the Bosnian Serbs and the Muslim Croat Federation. Um, they originally went in like January of I'm sorry, 96. I didn't go until October of 96. But Stephen, look, and I reflect on that time as some pretty gnarly things because like I went through uh, um, at least a dozen villages that were ethnically cleansed. That like there were blocks of buildings that we couldn't touch because they were booby trapped. These scumbags, we built, so our engineers went and built a soccer field. So there was like the part of Bosnia that was controlled by the Serbs, and there was the part that was controlled by the Muslim Croat Federation. And then the Muslim Croat side, we there was a school, and it was like from K through 12, two-story building. Our engineers went and cleared this field across the street, laid grass, and made a soccer field for kids to play soccer on. Somebody went in a few months after we built it and put anti-personnel mines in it during the night. And it's a soccer field for kids. That's the kind of hate that like, and I'm like, and if you put a Serb and a Croat next to each other, I couldn't tell them apart, but they sure as hell could. It was crazy. And but yeah, that's what that mission was, is like you create a stabilization force to and Bosnia was a NATO mission. And actually when I went to Macedonia, that was a United Nations peacekeeping mission. So we wore the baby blue UN hats. But it was interesting because you look at these dudes um and any other you couldn't, you were peacekeepers, so you had to kind of play nice, and they knew that. But I always looked at them like, anytime, man. There's one thing, if like we found them, I went and looked and pulled security at a mass grave site that had 40. They executed a whole busload full of people and buried them in a shallow grave, and we found out about it, and the UN, there was like a UN tribunal of like one of the UN committees or whatever, and they came, and we had to pull security while they went and excavated the site, and they were like little kid shoes they were pulling out of the ground. And I was like, these scumbags, man. But there's that, going back to the earlier point I was saying, is like there are really large type gigantic assholes on this planet. And that's where my role and a lot of other folks come in and do what we did, because you don't reason with these people.
Right. Yeah.
You have to terrorize them.
And I guess that, like, as you were saying that, I was thinking, it was like, well, what is actually accomplished by wiping out an entire school bus of people, like
Right.
killing kids? And I guess that's literally because there's no strategic value.
No.
So it's the only argument you
They're trying to destroy the gene pool. They're trying to destroy the gene pool.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
It was just so bizarre. Like I'd
No,
never seen
dumb.
anything like that before.
It's just so fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Like, ignorance drives me insane. It's like
Oh yeah.
we're all from those guys over there, all of us, every single person on the planet. We can go back to what was I just learned the best phrase for it too. It was what was it? It's not EULA, but it's first universal common ancestor or something like that. It's like we can
Right.
all go
Right.
back to that one thing, And so like
Yeah.
this idea that there's ethnic differences.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's this, and you know why? There's like I'm a little darker because my family lived further south,
Right.
and that's what happened. Or those guys have eyes like that because they were further north, and
Right.
that's what happened.
Yeah.
But
It
yeah,
was
so it just
so, it was so ridiculous. Like it was, and it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. And I remember, so our battalion commander, who's a lieutenant colonel, he had a secure, like he would go around the countryside, and he actually was on, so this is 1996. So would go on local radio stations and with his interpreter, and kind of like, here's what we're doing, trying to create stability. We're blah, blah, blah. And he had a security detachment that would go with him, like his Secret Service guys. And I would go, weird. I was one of them. And we were driving down a road, and saw a bunch of men standing outside this store. So he pulled over, and he'd like to go out and engage people, like go talk to the locals. And hey, I'm Colonel Layfield, and we kind of had it rehearsed where like it's kind of like a Secret Service thing. Like he would get out of the truck, and then we would get out and kind of take
Right.
corners like this, and just kind of. And there were two Serb policemen, and through the interpreter, one of the Serb cops said, "Well, you American soldiers, so you Americans don't know war like us, or we in Serbia do. You should leave, and you can't do anything to us." And Colonel Layfield, he's like, "Lewis, sir, come here." And I walk over, and he said, this guy thinks that the Serb army is better than you guys are. And I said, really? And the colonel said, "This sergeant right here, I just come back from the Desert Storm, all that stuff." And he said he fought the Iraqi army and beat them. What do you have to say to him? And the guy, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I looked at the interpreter, and I said, "You tell him to take a squad of his guys, and I'll take a squad of mine, and I'll meet him anytime, anywhere, day and night, and we'll see who comes out on top." And he told him that, and the guy's face kind of froze. He's like, "Oh no, no, my friend, my friend." I was like, "Yeah, my friend, my ass." Like, but that's just again going back to when people say horrible things about our country. Okay, we're not perfect in any way, shape, or form. Go to a place like that.
Mhm.
Go there. Go. And I would dare to say there's a good majority of the world that's the culture that unfortunately a lot of people live in.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, he backed down pretty quick because I looked him straight in the eye. I'm like, anytime you want to go, man, we'll see who comes out. And I know it's going to be me.
Mhm.
Oh, my friend, yeah, my friend, my ass.
Which actually brings up an
Um,
interesting question.
although, real quick on thinking this, I went to Slovenia in 2012 just to do some security assistance training with their army, and I listened to Laibach in Ljubljana in Slovenia. I think my industrial like quotient went up 10 points by doing that. So,
That's awesome. Um, so I imagine that in addition to just literal bad guys that you're dealing with, then you're also dealing with propaganda, and
oh
you know,
yes,
I imagine that is quite a whole other thing because you've got people, you know, you're there to try and help, and you've
right,
got people who are saying, no, 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 they're not. You know,
right.
so I imagine you're back.
Messaging is big, and I will tell you that I am amazed at what comes out of some of the major news outlets today,
Mhm.
and none of them there's not one of them that isn't party to this.
Right.
About narratives, and it's about um, stories they want to tell, and it's not always necessarily the what the straight news is.
Right.
And I'll share this with you. The two on my phone, the two news apps that I read every single day
Mhm.
are the BBC and Al Jazeera.
Mhm.
Al Jazeera is one of the most unbiased. Oh, sure, they report on the Middle East, but
Right.
when you look at the content of what they report, it's data, very
Mhm.
similar to the BBC. Whereas if you go on the NBCs or MSNBCs or Fox News, there's always some slant that they're trying to push, and it's just like, why am I looking at the same story, but there's two different interpretations of it?
Yeah,
You know what I
I've
mean?
been using Associated Press and Reuters, but that's good to know
Right.
because I'm always looking like that. So you know, it's one of those places where I trust your opinion, and I did honestly, it just never occurred to me to check those two, but I did know that the AP and Reuters are supposed to be
Right. They are as well. Yeah, those are the other. That's the those. It literally goes BBC, Al Jazeera, um, Associated Press, Reuters, um, and then Stripes has an app. Like Stripes is like the military's newspaper, which dates back to World War II, and stuff. That's the stuff I look at. But yeah, information and dude, and think about it, like this is me asking you these questions, maybe a little bit. Look at the music we grew up listening to. The front 242s and like the emergency broadcast network and Meat Beat and all the narratives that they have in that music, we're seeing it.
Oh yeah,
We're seeing all that right now, all
welcome
of
to the
it.
cyberpunk dystopia we read about. Yeah.
Yeah. Holy crap, man. Like, um, and I still, Jack Dangers is my spirit animal. I still think to this day, I would love to meet that guy. Just 5 minutes. Um,
Cool with stuff
but
like that. I think about that a lot, actually. Yeah.
yeah, think about it, man, because all that, what he was doing, what they were doing, and this was, look at the equipment they had that they were doing samples and stuff back then. It just blows my mind. And the Emergency Broadcast Network, they were big in Boston because they were from Providence, Rhode Island. So they did a lot of gigs at like Axis and I don't think they ever played Man Ray, but they did. I know I saw them a few times. They actually opened. Um, there was like an MTV tour, and it was Orbital, Meat Beat Manifesto, and I can't think of the other band. There was three of them, but EBN like opened for that show. I just went to go see Meat Beat Manifesto, and this was like Satyricon. That record was out. Oh, it was so good. God, it was so. That was one of the best shows.
So you were around during, were you aware of the band Out Out?
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So Mark is a friend of mine now,
Oh no kidding.
and he mixes and masters my stuff.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, like
Okay.
we've done. We actually we did a cover of Butric Acid by Consolidated. Like
Nice.
remember when all the bullshit started, X
Right.
number of years ago, we were like, somebody needs to step up and remind people of that. And so yeah, we did a cover of that. Oh, as a side story to that, I was doing a show and I with Stoneburner, and I'll do that cover. But now I have to.
Yeah.
And I got off stage and somebody walks up to me. We're up in Milwaukee, I think. And somebody comes off. I got off stage and this woman walks up to me. She was like, I'd never heard your material before, but I was in the clinic that got bombed when it got bombed.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, so thank you for talking about that and remembering that.
Yeah,
Uh,
when you guys when you guys played in Atlanta, that show, I was a month out from retiring, and Mikey and I came up, and you did that consolidated track, and I was like, yes, yes, that's my
um,
man right there. Yeah,
yeah, it's been an interesting run with all that. Like, watch. I was always amazed because I'll go up there and I'll say, "Hey, all these things are bad," And I've had watched fans walk out, and I'm like, "I don't know how you didn't catch this when you listened to my shit the first time, but
right, 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 and that's you know what, that's fine if
yeah,
they,
yeah, exactly." I've straight up said, I was like, "Look, if you don't agree with this, I don't give a shit. Burn my stuff. Don't listen to it. Oh
right,
no, I don't care.
right.
Like you're wrong.
Your
Basically,
feelings are not going to get hurt. You'll
yeah,
be fine.
yeah.
It's okay.
This is what you were doing is demonstrably wrong, and you're a dick. So I don't want you falling. That's fine.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah, so it's
Um, the 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 other thing you mentioned earlier, I just want to bring this up so I don't go off the bubble on it. Is like the processes, I guess, understanding you having your friend in Canada and being
yeah.
like awake nights that
So we were talking about this before the show started. I was talking
right,
about a friend in Canada who is on this Peter Watts. He and I
right,
had been talking at one point, either during the show or before or after, how he's really legit concerned that you know he's going to see troops on the border in 6 months.
right.
I have, in addition to Chris, I have a few other friends who I've gone to and been like, "Hey,
Yeah,
how scared should I be?" And my other friend said he was like, "I am just putting all of my hope that the military will not, because the military follows the Constitution, not the
yes, we
president,
do.
will not follow an illegal order."
And we won't. That doesn't, the layers of leadership that we have in the organization, that is not going to happen. There are no, I mean, so here at Fort Benning, this is kind of neat. So there's a lot of our NATO partners have liaisons here because they send foreign soldiers come to school here, school and all these other kind of things. So um, the Canadian liaison, he's a major, he's a riot. He's from Nova Scotia. And he hates hockey, which I think is hilarious. But he's a great guy, and I saw him a few nights ago, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't." He goes, "People are just okay. You see something on the news, or you read something in a print, and you don't. What's sad is that okay, am I going to critically analyze this? Is this just some propaganda and nonsense they're trying to stir up?" The United States Army or the military is not going to invade Canada. Canada has been one of our steadfast partners for decades and will continue to be. I mean, sometimes when a certain person that resides within the Beltway in DC like says things, I look at him and I'm like, what do you
Mhm.
like? I wish he had a Michael J. Fox like from Spin City. Like, no, don't sit, shh, don't no.
Mhm.
Um, he doesn't have that, but
I
no,
think.
Canada has always been a stalwart and will continue to be. The funny thing is, so right down the street from where I live, the Australian Sergeant Major that's here it's a 2 year assignment. He's a great guy, Dean Johnstone. Uh, the basement of his house is a pub, and it's called the Skippy Bar. But all the other foreign national liaisons, so we have guys from Germany, the Netherlands, France, the UK, Canada, Korea, South Korea, Indonesia, There's a couple others, but we all like every Friday night. I was there last Friday night. We go down and have a couple pints, and everyone's just having a great time and playing cards. And um, yeah, there's so many mechanisms that are layered within the Department of Defense that there's no way that would ever even remotely happen in any. And again, the oath of enlistment that I took over the every time I re-enlisted, I had to do it. It was I was sworn to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That was part of it. Not who is ever in leadership. It's the Constitution, and we will always abide by that. Um, and it's funny because when that topic comes up, I'm like, I can't even logistically figure out like how could that. And there's the people that say, well, we have black helicopters and we have the CIA is doing all this kind of stuff. Well, not maybe a little bit, but not to the not like the Jason Bourne level. Come on, it's a great film, but but there's we will always the Department of Defense will always honor, in my interpretation, that there is no concern whatsoever of us ever trying as a unified armed force
Mhm.
invade a partner neighboring country, especially Canada, because like I really dig poutine, and I don't want them not to make. And we have a Timmy Hose here. There's a Tim. They opened up a Tim Hortons here in
Yeah, they're
Georgia.
expanding.
And they're expanding. So
I think from the outside, um, it's difficult because what we see is I see the fear is that he's just going in and replacing all of these people that stand in his way and creating a vacuum that would allow him to just replace those guys and with people who are going to do it. So that's
right.
one part of it. And then,
Well, that's why when you okay, so when you saw the State of the Union address,
mhm,
there's a reason why the justices of the Supreme Court are in attendance
mhm.
and the chairmen of the Joint Chiefs are in attendance. But do they stand up and clap? No.
Hmm.
And that's by design because they have to remain neutral again
I
because
didn't think about that.
yeah, they don't. And they are by mandate, they cannot do that. Um, and here's I'll share this with you, man, because I had a very terse conversation with a friend of mine. We've been friends for years, and this person chose to choose politics over our friendship. And I mean, whatever.
Mhm.
And I said very simply, I said, I swore an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States from every president, from Ronald Reagan to Joseph Biden.
Right.
I think I have it. I think I understand what that means. With
Mhm.
you know what I mean. So and then this person kind of hung up on me afterwards. But I mean it's true. The politics are aside, and I don't care. Um, Everybody has the ability to choose who they think is the right person, and God bless them for it. That's what our country is based on.
Right.
But I, as a person in a uniform, I swore allegiance to the Constitution in our country, not who was running it. Never have, never, it'll never be that way. Um, and it just needs, just people need to be reminded of that. Like,
Well, I don't think a lot of people know. That's because I have brought that up with people, and I don't think they understand there is a intentional division right there.
yep, there always has been. And that's the beauty of how our founding fathers wrote that document and how they wrote the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all these things. Um, and I agree with you that some of it is dated and some of it is not relevant to what goes on today, but there is a means to update it and there is a means to have a discussion about it.
Right.
And again, my big word for the past few months, my friend, has been discourse. It's okay to have discourse.
Mhm.
That's what's great about our nation. You can agree to disagree, but not like take it personally or be offended by it. Like, okay, cool. That's how you see things. Well, right on.
Mhm.
Um, I may have told you this before. When I was working at Axis as a bouncer for a little while in '92 in Boston. So The way Axis was, there was an upstairs and a downstairs. And when they had bands, the bands would play downstairs, and they would use the upstairs as like the green room for the bands. So Rollins' band was playing, and there were two staircases that went up, and the security, me and the guy Denny was the other guy, and we would kind of guard, stand there, make sure nobody was going up or going down. And Henry Rollins came over to me and was like, "Hey, my name's Henry." I was like, "My name's Chris." And he's like, "What do you do here?" And we talked.
Mhm.
He was like, he said, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I just got out of the army, and I work here, and I'm going to school." And he said, "Were you in the desert?" And I said, "Yes, yes, sir." And he goes, "Oh," and he like shook my hand. He's like, "I really appreciate what you guys did." And he's like, "I protested the war." And I said, "That's cool, man. That's." He's like, "I wasn't protesting you guys. I
Right.
was I was protesting the war itself." And I was like, "That's the beauty of our country, man." And
Mhm.
he shook my hand again. He was like, "That's great." And like off he went. I was like in like a little bit of
Mhm.
I just shook Hank's hand twice, but that was kind of a cool moment because
Right.
he thought the way I thought. Like it's
Right.
okay to disagree about things, and not take it personally or like you mother effer and you blah, 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 and yeah, it just it drives me nuts. It always has and always will.
Yeah. And I think
But,
that kind of,
go ahead.
again, it's like one of those things. It's like there are so many things I can do that with until you get to human rights and the validity of individuals
Yes.
to exist. Because then we get to the whole, the flag represents everyone,
Yes.
not just the people that don't make you uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And and I know there's been some. I'm just very. So my son is finished up his senior year right now in college at Virginia Tech, and he and I have a lot of interesting discussions about politics and about because he's doing a degree program in international business with a minor in German, so he can read, write. I mean, he's doing real well, and he was going to go for his master's as well. And he's like, "Dad, there's people on my campus that are like wearing. Right, this is at Virginia Tech that are wearing like kafayas and carrying Palestinian flags." He's like, I don't. And I said, "Sam, they can do that. That's fine." I would ask him if you get in a conversation with him, like, "Do you understand the meaning behind that,
Hmm.
or or just have the conversation of what is your understanding of what is going on in Gaza or with the Palestinians? Like, and don't make it attributional. Just
Hmm.
have a conversation,
Right.
talk, um, because that's a horrible thing that's going on there. Nobody's right in that. I mean, it's brutal. But again, um, why? The rhetorical question for me is why is a 21-year-old college student in Virginia wearing a kafaya? Like, do you know the difference between a red and black kafaya? Like,
What exactly is a kafaya?
so the headdress, like there's a red checkered one and a black checkered one.
Mhm.
Um, and like I have a red one from that was given to me in Saudi Arabia, and I have a black one that my interpreter gave to me.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't quote me on this, but I think one means that you've actually been to Mecca, and one means you're Muslim. The other one means you've actually done the Hajj and you've gone to Mecca, if I remember correctly. And I could be off on that, but anyways, it's not a fashion statement. It's a symbol of their
Right.
religion. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Mhm.
Um, but no, and again, man, I've always admired and had nothing but respect and admiration for all the things that you and Donna do musically, your art. I mean, I've got 5 or 6 pieces of your art in my house, and there'll probably be some more. And the first thing you ever gave me, and it's in North Carolina right now in my house there, but it was like a children's book that you painted on the outside of, and it was like a wolf on it, and you signed the back of it. And I think I bought it. You guys were doing a gig in Raleigh,
Mhm.
and you were selling art upstairs, and I was like, well, this is gas money for them, and they're my friends. And you and Donna signed it, but you were like, thanks, Chris, for being our Minister of Defense and for having
Yeah.
guns. And I used
Well,
to tell people like that, like, what do you mean? I was like, dude, I'm Eagle Likeness's Minister of Defense. Ask Steven.
It's
I was
absolutely
anointed that.
true. I take great solace knowing that if something ever really awful was coming down the pipe and I called you up, you would be on the first flight up here
Yeah, I got your back, man. Maryland, I could. Maryland's Maryland. I'm just saying. Well, it's all good.
um just to backtrack because I want to finish this one thought on all this. I
Sure.
think the other fear from the outside, looking at what's happening now, is how few people are saying no to the fucker. You know,
Right.
like here, like all people whose job it is to say no
Right.
are, and that is, and it's so it really like what I remember Breaking Bad, like he just can't keep getting away with it, and
Right.
so it's a very much a sense of helplessness.
Well, here's what there's certain executive powers that he has and by position,
Mhm,
period. Um, I do think that, and of course, he's going to surround himself with, as any president would, with the people that are going to support your line of thinking. Um, I would dare to say that that's the beauty of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and that they aren't appointed by him.
mhm.
Um, well, I take that back. They are appointed by him, but the guys that are there right now have already been there, and it's not about.
And so he can't fire them. Is that kind of?
Well, he could, but it would have to be something pretty egregious for them to do it.
Mhm,
And I'll go open. I'll go open on this. Like I was not a fan of General Milley at all in any respect. And he, um, where I see, and here's where I see their role is to advise the Secretary of Defense and the President with military matters. But I also think there could be a piece of mentorship and like, hey, sir, check this out. Um, I don't know if that's happening or not, but I will tell you that the Army leadership that's the chair. I know all three of the guys that are the chairman or the chief of staff of the Army, the vice chief of staff of the Army, and the sergeant major of the Army are all. I know all three of them. And the vice chief of staff of the Army is a very good close friend of mine, and I know that they are not going to let anything happen. He doesn't have that, and here's the frightening thing: is that based on executive privilege and the way the United States Code is written, there's things he can do, but there's a lot he can't do without authorization. So when when the spinsters and the media outlets, and I mean all of them, say things and it riles the American people, all of us up. I'm like, nah, he can't do that shit. It's not going to work like that. It doesn't. Um, they I'm I'm cautious. I do like some of his positioning. Um, Not to get too political, but what he's been doing with the Houthis in the Red Sea, and that needs to have been done a long time ago.
mhm,
Um, there's so much international shipping that goes through that very narrow neck of ocean
mhm,
that affects our entire planet. And they, you know, doing kinetic strikes against the Houthis' capability to launch missiles at ships.
mhm,
Man, you go on Reddit. There's a whole subreddit that talks about the Houthis, and you can see where like there's a cargo ship and there's nothing military about it, but
mhm.
then there's a rocket slams in the side of it, and you know what I mean? Like that's I mean you live very close to Baltimore. You see those ships all the time. It's like holy crap. Um,
Yeah, and that's actually thank you for saying that because that is what back 8 years ago or whatever. I had somebody say, well, what if it gets better? And I was like, honestly, if it gets better and he does a great job, I'm all for it. It's
right.
not about like he can't ever. And one of the things I've actually been thinking about and trying to figure out who to ask or who to talk to about is like, okay, can you tell me something positive? Because I like so much of what's going on, I can't see anything positive coming out of it.
Well, here's what I'll tell you, man. And okay, so I'll give an example. When I took over as the battalion command sergeant major for the infantry battalion I had here at Fort Benning, One of the things that a lot of people told me and I followed was unless it's life, limb, or eyesight, let all the systems go for 100 days.
Mhm.
Just let them keep going. So you can make an assessment and look at things and go, okay, let me write that down. That's something, blah, blah, blah. The ship's going forward. I would say collectively that, and this is just my personal opinion and doesn't reflect anything of who I work for or where I work, whatever. I don't think the previous administration did anything to set the conditions for success for the current administration when they switched out.
Mhm.
And that's typical of any presidential switch. That happens every time.
Mhm.
Like, did you ever hear the story about when George W. Bush got hired,
Mhm.
when he got hired, when he became the president, when his staff showed up, all the W keys were pulled out of the keyboards in the West Wing.
Oh,
I
I
swear
haven't
to
heard.
God, it's a true story. They just shit like that.
Hey.
And um, but it's still we're still in that first 100 days window. And he's I am cautiously optimistic.
Mhm.
Uh, there's some people around him that have some talent. There's some that I'm concerned about, but
Mhm.
that's the beauty of our government and having a Congress and a House of Representatives and all these things is that there are checks and balances that are in place that I believe in the system.
Mhm.
I bet my life on it for 3 decades.
Mhm.
So I would ask everybody else, anyone that's listening tonight or whatever, I would just let's see what happens. Um, by nature, he's a businessman, and by nature, he's all about one thing, and that's him. So a lot of things have happened since the third Monday in January until today.
Mhm.
Let's see what happens. And then we go forward from there. That's the trust we have in our leadership, and we whether whether you people vote for a certain person or not, they were elected to that position. Um, so let's see what happens. It might be a bumpy ride, but look at our country's history. Could you imagine being um, and I was reflecting on this a few weeks ago, and there was a special I just was like flipping through YouTube, and it was when Lyndon Johnson takes the oath of office to be the president when Kennedy was assassinated. Kennedy's coffin is in the airplane, and Jacqueline Kennedy is standing next to him, and there's blood on her from her husband. But we were still able to continue to move forward as a country, and something that horrific caught on, the Magruder tapes and all that kind of stuff. But so the system will work. It will, and it's people that are in the right places at the right times, making the right decisions to do that. It's not about, and I get a little frustrated when I hear people like, oh, um, they give the reference like he's a king. Okay, he might think that,
Mhm.
or is that a narrative that someone's pushing?
Right.
And again, that's an objective statement. I'm not saying that, but like,
Well, I
is a
think that
new
when you do look at the number of people, like the people who are putting forward this idea that he should be able to be elected again, like there's
right?
actual like legislation being pushed.
Yeah,
You know,
I don't. I mean, dude, and there was another person. I'll put it to you. There was that's happened over the years, multiple times,
Mhm.
because they look at the success of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and what he brought the country out of the Great Depression and then all things the Second World War, and he had 3 terms in office. But
Right.
no, we've already said it's 2. He's
Mhm.
on his second one.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens over this time frame. And um, we elected him, and he's he's rattling the saber and he's shaking things up. Do I agree with everything that he is doing? Not necessarily, but he's still our boss. Like, we have to support our leadership
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
absolutely. And
faith that
I
they're going to do the
understand
right thing.
how that works. My brother's military, my stepbrother's military, and
Right. Yeah.
we had a very similar conversation at one point. It's like, no, this is
I
like I get that. Like I understand that like
right.
you're
I never made all the right decisions as a leader, and I know I did some fucked up things, and I get that. But I would have people come to me and look at like very trusted advisors or mentors, and or look at me like, dude, hey man, why don't you look at this? Like I have four people at the museum working on my staff that all worked for me when I was in a green suit, and the reason why I hired them, and they're all retired, is because I trusted their input and valued what they said when I was in the army, and now they're in positions where they can look at me and like, hey man, you might want to look at this, and you surround yourself with people that are smart and you're going to react to and listen to.
um
I don't always make the right decisions. I'm fully aware of that, but I
no,
try to do my best.
nobody does. One of the
Yeah,
things, having been on social media now and just kind of being a public figure in this teeny tiny little way, I have gotten pretty good at anticipating responses to this. So I just want to say this
sure.
to anybody else who is watching this. I, I there are things Chris has said where, it's like where you are open to listening to criticism or things,
Right,
and I can hear the choir in the back of my head. Yes, but he doesn't do it, and all of the blah 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 blah, all this other
right,
stuff, which I
right,
agree with.
right,
But there is absolutely zero point of me bring that frustration that I have to Chris because he
right,
certainly can't do anything about it, and it's also not his. He could what he is giving us with this conversation. I think is incredibly useful.
right,
But anything getting into those kind of fears and things like that, I don't see that's not part of the mechanism that's in place. You know,
right.
like
Yep, absolutely.
any any responses are it's all pure speculation and it's all and I don't see it actually this and this I don't want to get into speculation. It's like I have
Sure.
somebody who knows how things actually work. So I'm
Right,
not going to go at him on this emotional level, even I wouldn't do that anyway, but there would be no point to it. So
right.
I just want to
And,
encourage anybody out there who's feeling like, oh, I don't even know, like I get being scared, and it totally makes sense.
sure.
But
Uh,
you can't let it drive you either.
fear, fear is the mind killer. I had
Right?
the references there. The I always look back, and this is again my unhealthy addiction with all things the Second World War, and I look at like the resiliency of the British people. Their country was getting fucking bombed and rocketed on the regular, but they still were able to function and do the things they did to be able to help defeat fascism in the 20th century. They did it. Um, and I guess this is just an opinion. The country was galvanized when 9/11 happened. I think we've lost that to an extent. But I will tell you, there's young men and women that still are. I see them every week here at Fort Benning that are answering our nation's call and doing the things that need to be done because there are, like I said earlier, there are assholes on this planet that you can't reason or discuss or politic with.
Mhm.
That's the way it is. And when my frustration comes from when people say things and pass judgment and they haven't even or not been but haven't even thought, let's try to look at it from that perspective of the tyranny that exists in many of the countries around the world,
Mhm.
um, that I've seen firsthand, and
Even
that's why I like
smaller,
industrial music. Just saying,
even smaller than that. I mean, it's just remarkable to me the people who don't have lived their entire lives within 50 miles of where they were born.
right?
Like there's such a portion of the population is like that, and just from being a touring musician by nature, we go everywhere and meeting all these people and stuff. And I will tell you that like I think it's just so impossible or very difficult for people to really understand, you know, that the world is very different from
Yes, it is.
mile radius to
Yes,
300 miles over this way, or 1,000 miles or whatever, it's unfortunate because I do feel like a lot of the problems that we're seeing come from the lack of critical thinking, and it's hard to think critically when you don't know what else there is, like
What
the
else? Right, right. Why would I think critically
yeah,
if I don't realize what is out there? You're absolutely right. But I don't want to be like elitist and
yeah.
when that comes up because like, oh, just because you've been and you
Mhm.
did all these things. Like, no, 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 that's not necessarily but like you in this age of information, when we pick up these things that are in front of us and can fucking find out anything, whether it's good, right, bad, or indifferent, um, um, challenge yourself to find the right information about the right thing and then form an opinion. Be informed.
Right.
Don't look at don't look at TikTok or Instagram and go like, well, that's it's on there. It must be good. And if I look at things like I did a paper when I was in the Sergeant Major's Academy, and we had to do a paper on information operations, and I talked about not trying to be morbid, but I talked about Himmler and how he controlled the narrative of the Third Reich as it became a thing in the 1930s. And one of the things, like when we had a discussion about the paper and whatever, and I was like, and this was 10 years ago, I was like, he would be doing backflips right now
Mhm.
if
Yeah,
with
I
the
mean, I think that's
information. Oh my God, man. Um, like you can put an app on your phone and send things out, and thousands of people will see it in nanoseconds. Um, and I don't think people realize like how impactful being able to control a narrative.
oh, I was reading.
A lot of folks don't realize like the Telegram app. The Telegram app is a Russian app,
Mhm.
and most of the news outlet, everything that news oriented comes out of Russia is controlled by the Russians. It's like North Korea. It's like all these other kind of states. Like they control the narrative of what they want people to hear. And
Yeah,
are we any better or less than that at this point with all the
I
major
was reading this
major
book
media outlets?
that was talking about how we reached a point and a number of years ago, long enough ago that's definitely impacting now, where there were more fake news sites than there were
Right,
actual news sites.
right,
And that's just terrifying right there. Just uh, I know somebody who at one point was like, and he's a smart guy, but he was like, trans people are trying to get more rights than I have. And I'm like, you're a middle-aged white dude. Like, what possible more rights could somebody else have? And it was very disappointing because I was just like, think about that just for a second. Like, contextualize, you know, your place in the world and look at
right,
that. Like,
right,
literally, all they want to do is just exist, you know?
right.
So it's it it's remarkable to me, like the and I've done it, like I've seen something that fits my narrative and shared it and then realized after the fact I'm like, oh, that was bullshit.
Right.
All of us fall for it. So and my wife is Donna is phenomenal at catching that shit. She's like, I don't buy that at all. And she's like, let's look somewhere else before we.
Yes, yes, yes. Because it's like, wait a minute. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, narratives and it just amazes me that like if it's a TikTok, then it's real. I mean,
Right.
and I'm like, come on, man, are you kidding me? Like, one of the things I challenge when if I give a tour to a group of soldiers, and I'll challenge them to look at books and not things on a LCD screen because that's the easy button.
Right.
And there's a like here's one of the things I talk about when you come to the museum. When you come to the museum, um, an exhibit that we have that's called The Last 100 Yards, which covers 8 key battles of our nation's history from the American Revolution all the way through the Global War on Terror. So for the American Revolution, we talk about the Battle of Yorktown, last major engagement between the Continental Army and the British during the American Revolution. Well, One of the things about that battle was there were 20 to 30 soldiers from the 1st Rhode Island Regiment that were part of that battle. What's significant about the 1st Rhode Island? Like, what do we need to know about those guys? Over 70% of that regiment was made up of African American soldiers.
Mhm.
So when we talk about cultural inclusion and DEI and all the things our country's been consumed with
Right.
for a number of years,
Mhm.
we have had African American soldiers in our army pretty much since day one. But
Mhm.
show me a high school history book that talks about that.
Right.
Again, controlling the narrative and here's my Bostonian. Who was the first American to be killed during the American Revolution? And my Bostonian is going to come out. There's a big Masque. It's in the middle of Tremont Street in front of the old State House in downtown Boston. At the Boston Massacre in 1774, a freed African American slave named Crispus Attucks was the first American to die.
Mhm.
But again, like, ask your average
Right.
schools. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but those young whippersnappers, but they're going to go on TikTok or Google and go like, well, what is, you know what I mean? Like, but that's our country's history. We've always been a melting pot. We always will be one.
Right. And that's the good, that's the thing. Like, it's frustrating because I think that it's very easy to look at me looking like this. And if you don't know me, kind of assume that I'm going to be like really anti-establishment or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm just anti-asshole. And like, I think our country's really cool. Like, I grew up, and it was a very shocking thing for me is I've said this a few times now, but I grew up with the whole like, America's number one in science, America's number one with this or that or the other
Right.
thing. And then watching that becoming less of a point of pride and more of a we don't want to be number one because science is bad, like
Right.
has been very disconcerting and very sad.
Right.
And like I love NASA and like we went to the very large array, you know, in Contact where they have the big.
Oh, that when I remember you guys put those pictures up. That's so cool.
Yeah. And you know, like I was saying to somebody else about this, I was like, you know, I'm not a religious person, man, but there was this incredible sense of pride in humans because, like, look, we just
Like,
see
dude,
bags of salt.
we figured that out. We
Yeah,
figured out how to do that. Like, that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, and honestly, it was just, and they're just standing there under these gigantic things in this open sky, and you just feel the sense of like, hello, universe, we're
Right.
here.
We're right here. We're looking at you. We're trying to talk to you. And like I still and we talked earlier about like Star Wars, and then I got super hyper fascinated with NASA and all things the space, and the race to the moon. And so my mother's older brother, my uncle Ed, was a aerospace engineer for Grumman,
Hmm.
and Grumman built the lunar lander and they built the lunar rover.
Oh wow.
Apollo 12 was the first one that had the lunar rover. I think it was Apollo 12 had the first lunar rover on it. So my uncle was on the design team. They had to figure out how to get the lunar rover into the existing space in the lunar lander, and then as short a time as possible, pull it out and put it together and drive it around and all that stuff. So when the LEM lands on the moon, when they would leave, like the command capsule would launch and the legs would stay on the moon. So in that Apollo mission, there's a gold plate on the leg section that has the signatures of all the design team, and my uncle's signature is on the moon. How cool is that? Like,
That's fucking awesome.
and he shared with me, it was like, that's just when he watched that all, he's like, I had something to do with that. Like, that's kind of cool. And
There's,
we did that so many years ago without PowerPoint, fucking Microsoft Office, emails, all this shit. And there was a drive and a commitment, and we figured it out.
well, you know about the thing that I did for NASA, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like that actually, you know, went out into space. But one of the cool things was that, you know, we got to actually go there, go to Goddard, and
Right.
we go into their clean room. And again, sorry if here's the story before, but it's still fucking cool. So
No,
fuck
it's
you.
great. It's still a great story.
But we were able to look down into the clean room and saw these gigantic hexagonal mirrors that
Right.
eventually went out to be part of the James Webb.
Right.
But just saw them right there. So it's kind of like, you know, seeing a star or something. It's like, do you know how cool you are? You know? So,
Yeah, 100%, man. I've been just like the ability of our society or humans to be able to do things.
mhm.
I just get like and I'll probably leave it with this, but I get frustrated because we have the capability of doing so many great, amazing things because we've done it.
Hmm.
And I look at things like, okay, when Columbus, like, I'm gonna sail across this body of water that we don't know what's on the other side, and we're gonna go find a thing. We think it's there,
Right.
and they found it. Or, um, Lindbergh flying the Atlantic. Like, I think I have an airplane that I think it has enough gas to get to
Right.
France. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna try.
From the Wright brothers to space in less than 100 years. I mean,
Yeah, it
that in
just
and of
blows
itself.
my mind, like that we're able to do those.
Mhm.
Um, um, yeah, it just it renews my faith in the human spirit and innovation and the ability to think beyond the stupidity that we may or may not exist around and to continue to do great things.
Mhm.
And if I didn't have that optimism, I think I would have not been on this. Like and it's funny. I've had people say to me like, "How can you be so optimistic after doing what you did for most of your adult life?" And I'm like, "Because I kind of have to.
Yeah.
If I didn't, I would have been like I'd be in a lunatic asylum right now. If I didn't think there was an optimism of what's going to happen and that kind of stuff. So, um, all right, what else, brother? I don't. It's
No,
been
I,
two
I think
hours,
that,
but I don't know what if you had a call.
no,
What else can I do for you?
I think that was perfect. I think that that was fantastic. Thank you so much for just well for all of these years. But no, this like I this was exactly I don't think I knew what I was hoping for, other than I knew we would have a good conversation.
I didn't either. I was like, it's Steven. I trust him. It'll be fine.
Well, and that
It'll
was
be
kind of how I felt about the whole thing too. So that was better than I think I could have ever hoped for. Thank you so much for everything you've done. Um, uh, please tell all of your ambassador friends and anybody else you
yeah.
run with. Thank you for doing being good, smart people.
And same with you, my friend. I appreciate all that you do and what you bring to the table and having and I was very humbled and happy that you asked me to do this discussion because you and I don't think we've ever not had a pretty like awesome chat even about the most random things.
Just
And all
once
the best
again,
to you.
you are at the what museum again? In
The National Infantry Museum in Columbus, Georgia.
okay, excellent. Well, again, you could make far worse decisions in life than stopping and visiting there and talking to Chris. Like he's again one of the most genuine human beings I've ever known.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Same to you. And all the best to you and your lovely bride, my friend. And looking forward to seeing you guys in Atlanta, hopefully soon for a gig, and then I can bring you guys
A
down
lot
for a
coming
quick
up this
tour.
year. So I don't know exactly how it's all going to roll yet, but yeah, we'll be around.
That's
We're
awesome.
going to be very busy. So
All right, man. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks, brother. I'll see you soon, man.